Hello, everyone. I am Jonathan Little here with the Poker Coaching Podcast with Brian Koppelman, who is the co-writer of Rounders and Ocean's 13, two great gambling movies. Also, the co-creator, showrunner, and executive producer of the hit show Billions on Showtime, and writer, director, producer, actor, and many, many, many other productions. And he has a great podcast called The Moment. So, hello, welcome.
Hey, man. Great to be here with you, Jonathan. I think you're great for the game of poker, and anytime I've ever run across you in the world, you've been incredibly kind and helpful. And I think I might have knocked you out once of a charity tournament. So all in all, so thrilled to be here.
Well, it's always nice when you like someone and you take all their money. So we've kind of all been on lockdown recently, right? So what have you been spending your free time on besides posting on Twitter all day?
So I've been trying to stick to some of my, one thing I've been doing on Twitter clearly is because we're all in this period of isolation, I thought it would be fun if everyone shared I call the first cup of coffee in the day the Royale because I think it's so special it needs its own name. And so I've been sharing my Royale in the morning with hundreds of Twitter followers who post their Royales. And so we're all drinking our first coffee of the day together, which lends a sense of community and a shared experience in a time when community and shared experience are difficult to come by. And so I have been posting a lot on Twitter about that. I've been keeping my routine, though, meaning I wake up, I meditate, I have the Royale, I do my morning pages, which is what I sort of the way I hypnotize myself into doing creative work for the day. And I've been trying to produce pages, though this week, regular writing that I do, but this week I've been, and I encourage everybody to be kind to themselves this week. This is a huge adjustment. And even if we're just scrambling, like you just told me before we started, you've learned to plan ahead in terms of food. We're all scrambling and we're all sort of making accommodations and like, okay, we're okay. We've satisfied our immediate needs, but then you got to let the psychic piece of this, the waves hit you. You have to absorb them. You got to be kind to yourself, breathe, and then worry about being productive and doing work and all that stuff.
So I'm normally very, very productive, at least to the best of my ability. And this last week, since my wife has been home and my kids have been home, haven't got a whole lot done. And I guess that's just how it's going to be for a while.
Don't be mad at yourself about it. We'll all find those rhythms of work that and if you're someone who's always, as you have, Jonathan, if you're always productive and always able to grind and work, you're going to be able to grind and work. But this is a seismic change. And so it requires us to reorient ourselves. And it takes sea legs. Seth Godin's bringing this up. It takes a minute to get your sea legs. So we have to get our sea legs.
It's important to be kind to yourself too. A lot of people get discouraged or disgruntled when when they're not going according to plan, but
correct.
Nothing's going according to plan right now. So get used to it, I suppose. So you mentioned the morning pages. What is that? That might be unfamiliar to a lot of people.
Sure. Morning pages. I was a blocked writer, meaning I knew I wanted to do something creative. I felt within me these emotions, these creative impulses, but I was unable to get them out. And my lifelong best friend, who's my creative partner and all these endeavors, David Levine, gave me this book by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way. And what that book purports to do is help you break through these kinds of blocks. And in fact, it's one of the rare things in life that does exactly what it purports to do. And the main tool in it is morning pages, which are 3 longhand pages that you write with a pen. You don't stop the pen, stream of consciousness. And what happens as you do these morning pages over and over, you start to sort of free yourself from a lot of the things that are constraining you from doing the work.
So I attempted to do the morning pages per your recommendation a few years ago, and I did it for like 3 weeks. Then I just stopped having stuff to say.
Well, but you're also I would say this, you're productive, right? You've written books. You weren't in a state of being blocked. You're able to produce work. What would happen if you would have made yourself get through that is, sometimes that happens, right? You run out of stuff to say. But then if you force yourself to keep the pen going, you will start to see the things that you really want to do that you're not doing, the way where you really want to spend your time. Like, it's a process. It's not an easy thing, but I have found it to be very useful. But again, dude, you're able to actualize yourself. Most people aren't.
Well, at the same time, too, though, I'm not doing necessarily creative stuff, whereas you're doing very creative things, right? And I think that's a little bit different, because I'm more so just repeating what I know to some extent, whereas you are creating things out of nothing or based on inspiration.
But it's still hard. It's still hard for most people, even if you're writing a book about what you know. As you know, man, you want to write your stuff so that the prose is clean, so that people understand it, so that it's entertaining, so that it makes people want to keep reading, right?
Very true.
That stuff has a creative element, but it may be powerful for you to not think of it as being creative. That may be a tool that helps you to do, right? All this stuff is ways of sort of tricking ourselves into doing the thing. I mean, we all have to find all sorts of different ways to fold more at poker. So whether that means, right, whether it's Ed Miller's pyramid or somebody, like, we all have to find ways to remind ourselves that mostly we should fold. And if we're in, we should mostly raise. Like, there's lots of different ways to think about it. And yes, at the high levels, the various differences in the smallest percentage of, well, no, actually in that spot, you should do this. But we're all trying to find many different ways to remind ourselves of the essentially boring notion that you should mostly fold pre-flop.
You have to do the work, and you have to do it. You just have to get in there and do it, is what it amounts to. And I know a lot of poker players especially get very, they procrastinate about everything besides exactly poker, and sometimes even about poker, and it results in them not getting a whole lot done. And doing things like the morning pages and meditating and whatnot will just help you realize what's important and what you need to do, right?
It does really work for me. Because, well, I find meditation is a great tool for helping to decrease the physical manifestations of anxiety. And especially at times like these, man, I find it very, very handy.
For sure. So I heard that the club in Rounders, the best poker movie ever made, was modeled after the Mayfair Club, which is in New York City. And I never got to play there. It closed down a few years before I arrived in New York City. But can you explain what the Mayfair Club is, and paint a picture for people like me who never got to play there?
So the Mayfair Club was on 25th or 24th Street between Madison and Park, on the north side of the street, in the basement of a kind of fancy high-rise apartment building.
Was it Gramercy Park Hotel or a different one?
It wasn't in the Gramercy Park Hotel. It was in an office building. And
okay.
Not an office building, a residential building. And you would walk in the building, and you would go left down stairs, 2 flights of stairs, and you would get buzzed in like in the movie. And a woman named Ingrid was behind the front desk. She did wear a thing that you could press a button and the police precinct would come running. And you would buy the amount of chips that you wanted. You didn't have cash at the table. So yeah, you would buy chips, and then you would kind of wait for a seat to be open. And they would have must move tables and rovers. And mostly when I started, I was playing stud. The first night I was there, the guy who Kanish is sort of based on was there, and he was playing hold, and he came over to our stud table, beat me at stud. And the language, the romance of it, that there was this whole world literally underground in New York City where people were playing poker, and I loved poker. And I was from a very young age, I loved poker. I'd thought a lot about it. I wasn't gifted at it, but I was, I'm a lifetime barely winning player, but winning player. And I keep track of my wins and losses, and I'm a year-to-year winning player by a little bit. But I wasn't great at it. I didn't have some incredible natural skill at it, but I loved everything about it. I love the fact that when you sit at the table, the world disappears, and you're just hyper present in that world of, thinking about, back then nobody was thinking about ranges in the way that you think about ranges now, but I read every poker book that was available to me then. And which was meant, I read probably 30 to 50 poker books in 1996 and 97. And every book that had stories about poker too, right? So I would read Cloutier's book, which is just like gambling stories, really. Or I would read I read every one of Doyle's books, I read everything I could about Amarillo Slim and Sailor Roberts, and I read all of Mike Caro's books back then. And so I had all that stuff in my head when I would go down to the Mayfair Club. Eventually I started playing Hold'em down there. It was smaller than the Chesterfield, and which is the version of it in Rounders. The other club, which is like Teddy KGB's place, it was more like, I guess, the Diamond Club, which was the other sort of. Oh no, it was more like the VFW. That's where I saw somebody get cheated. I saw a guy try to cheat, and they bounced him out of the club. And that was the second day. So the first day I went to the Mayfair. The second day I went to the Veteran of Foreign Wars place, the VFW, where they had it on 30th Street in Manhattan. And there was a guy named Eddie KGB behind the desk. And we got him to give us permission to call it the character Teddy KGB. He was a Russian guy. He had fought in the war. He was old. He wasn't a mobster. But there were Russian gangsters around, and there were all sorts of money lending things around. And I tried, Dave and I sort of like cataloged all of it, man. And it was, man, was it amazing to go walk into those places and play. I'd played in the LA places, but that felt very different. The clubs in New York, you really had to give a shit about poker to find your way to those places. You had to get someone to vouch for you, all that stuff.
So I was reading online about the Mayfair Club, and I read that the players dealt their own cards. Was that accurate?
Yeah.
So it was probably pretty easy to cheat.
At the Mayfair Club, you dealt your own cards with a burner on the bottom. No, look, there were a couple of older, tougher guys who did what they could to make sure the games were straight. There were a bunch of guys who played in the World Series of Poker, and like Mickey Appleman, who there were a couple of years where Mickey was considered one of the best card players in the world. He was written about in all the books. He was there all the time. The guy who owned it, Mike Schickman, was a great high stakes poker player. So those people would sort of stand watch over a lot of it and make sure that you weren't getting cheated. But I always felt that we were all getting cheated, or that it was always possible. I mean, that's why the movie features that stuff so heavily, right? Because you're sitting there, and Dave and I are thinking, well, how's anyone believing that this is straight? But then you got to understand, like during the day, you'd go in. There would only be like 2 tables during the day, a stud table, maybe 3 people were playing. You kind of knew them. You were dealing too. I would go home and read about all the different ways I might get cheated. So I would and I would study the way the mechanics grip. I would study the way that like people could rip me off to try to protect myself. There was that rule, only English at the table. I mean, all that stuff was so that you couldn't be colluded against or lose. But then I did learn all those techniques like chip placing and all the different ways so that I could protect myself and so that we could depict it in the film.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I never even really considered the idea that I could be getting cheated in live poker today, because I only play in casinos where like the penalty for cheating would be quite high to some extent.
Well, you could still be getting colluded against at any moment.
You can, for sure. But like in tournaments, you don't really play against the same people very often. I mean,
right.
I guess in theory it happens sometimes towards the end of a tournament. Maybe someone has 50% of the other guy or something like that. But like I don't even have to consider that. But back in the day, that was a major concern for all players everywhere, right?
Well, yeah, and all the books were about that, right? All the poker books would tell you, I mean, when the books about Sailor and Doyle going through Texas were all about showing up at a game and trying to defeat the guys cheating them, or knowing they were going to be cheated and trying to win anyway.
For sure. There's a book, I think, what's it called? Oh, here it is. Poker Wisdom of a Champion, right down there by Doyle Brunson. Check that out. It's like he gives about 10 tips about poker and a bunch of fun stories. Yeah. And I love stories and poker. We actually had a book come out by D&B Publishing recently called Poker and Pop Culture, where it goes through like all of the poker references in pop culture and discusses them. It's like a 500 page book.
Who did that?
A guy named Martin Harris.
I gotta find that. Oh, I know that guy's work. I know he's written a bunch of those kind of books.
He
about music.
He's done all sorts of stuff in the poker media, and he's very, very good. And he knows everything about poker and pop culture, apparently. Right. So, excellent. So were there any other fun stories from the Mayfair Club involving people that we may know? Because a lot of the best poker players in the world, especially from the 2003-ish era, kind of came from the Mayfair Club, right?
Oh, well, Howard was there. I mean, I didn't always play with all these guys, right? They were playing bigger than I was a lot of the time. But Eric Seidel came out of there, and Howard came out of there. And
did these guys play a lot of other games, or is it only poker they were playing?
Well, Eric was a backgammon player, and,
right.
And they played backgammon at the Mayfair before I was. So the years that I was really there were 95, 96, 97. But before I was there, it was a backgammon club. It really wasn't a backgammon club. Like when I was there, people would play pool, waiting for a table. The food was pretty good at the Mayfair. They had waitresses.
So they had pool tables. So how many poker tables were there? I'm just trying to figure out what this even looks like.
8.
8 poker tables or pool tables?
Poker tables.
Poker tables. How many pool tables?
10. It was small.
Well, you say that's small. It's actually kind of big. It's bigger than a lot of Las Vegas poker rooms.
It was not a big room. 8, I would guess. The pool table was in the other room. Like you'd walk through that area, the desks, the pool table. I would say most of the stories that I have from that time in some way, shape, or form ended up in our work. You know what I mean? Like the truck, that's a real thing. Joel Bagels, the real Joey Knish, he lent that truck that was a pastry truck or bread truck. He sold bread and stuff. He lent that truck to guys who were busted.
Got to get him back in action, I suppose. So everyone always wonders what Teddy KGB had on the last hand of Rounders whenever he presumably ran a big bluff. You want to go through the hand real quick?
I'm never going to talk about what he had.
Never going to talk about it. So I have ideas. So we're playing 50, 100 heads up with $27,000 stacks, okay? Pretty deep, right? And Mike raises from the small line with 9-8 of spades. Back then, the big blind was the button heads up, I think. So it's the opposite of what it is today. So I really don't like Mike's min raise because he's going to get called every time, right? Because Teddy has to put in $100 into a $400 pot in position. Sure. It's like, yeah, we're not folding. So I would recommend him raise bigger or probably have a lot of a limping strategy. So Mike gets a pretty good flop. He flops the nuts. Comes 10-7-6.
It's a good flop.
Yeah. And he decided to check, and then Teddy decides to bet $2,000 into the $400 pot.
Right. But we can't look at we can look through today's prism at the mistakes that each person makes and playing all the games in Rounders, but looking at the time when Hold'em was still a very new game in New York back then, right? And the way people thought about this stuff was different than the way people think about it now. I mean, just read Super System, and which is what was the book then that everyone was basing all of their actions on, was Super System.
Yeah, it's all about blasting it.
It was super. What's that?
Super System about blasting it, winning all these pots that don't belong to you, right?
Yeah, Super System and Sklansky's books and Mason Malmud, right? Those were the other books that everyone was reading then.
But even then, none of those were on No Limit Hold'em. Only Doyle's was No Limit Hold'em, as far as I know.
There was a Sklansky book on No Limit Hold'em.
Okay. Well, so anyway, what I was going to say though is I think actually both players, assuming their logic about the other player was right, like has a lot of merit. You really should be doing some overbetting when you're playing very deep stacked. Because you want to put your opponent's whole stack at risk. And if Teddy thinks that Mike will literally only put all of his money in with exactly the nuts, then he's going to win every pot by the river, assuming he thinks Mike is actually weak, right? And, Mike on the other side of the coin, normally you just want to be betting with your straights because you want to get money in the pot on the flop. But if Teddy thinks you're weak and he's just going to blast you every time,
if really that's how Teddy KGB plays, right?
Yeah. And so Teddy was already probably a little bit tilted because he just got stacked by Mike, and now he's going to try to get him again.
His tell has been exposed,
right? And so, I think both players have good logic to play this hand in this manner so far. Like, why would Mike not raise the flop? Because he wants to keep Teddy blasting, right? So Mike check called the flop, the 5x pot bet, which is whenever you see the guy bet 5x pot when you have the straight, you're getting very, very happy. Turns a 2 of clubs, just complete blank. Mike checks. Teddy now bets pot. Starting to become more reasonable, but he can set up a big river jam, which, spoiler alert, that's coming. Mike does not need to raise because, again, whenever your opponent either has a really good hand, like a set, or nothing, you just want to keep him in the pot with all of his nothing, right? So I like the call there. And then the river was the ace. So it's 10, 7, 6, 2, ace. Mike checked again. Teddy pushed all in for 1.5 times pot, $20,000. So I know you're not going to say what Teddy had, but I think it was either a very good hand. Could have been something like a set, or it could have been something like a draw of some sort. So what draws make sense on 10, 7, 6, 2, ace? It's probably just a gut shot, right? Like Jack 8. That would make a lot of sense to blast the flop because you want to get your opponent to fold. And if they call, you still have a draw to the nuts.
I mean, the way we were thinking about all of this stuff was that this is a gunfight, right? These are two gunslingers. It went one way at the beginning of the movie, had to go the other way by the end of the movie. And we're thinking about these as psychological forces against each other. And I love the analyses of the hands that people do. For whatever reason, Dave and I decided a long time ago we would never even give a hint about what Teddy had. I'll listen to any theory. And I enjoy hearing about, at the time we were just trying to make the poker scenes understandable to people who weren't poker people, and that people who played the game would think it was the most realistic they'd ever seen depicted in a movie, which we did do. We had spent all those hours thinking about it, reading about it, talking about it with people. We knew we had to make sure the last hand got all the money, all the money had to go in. So just finding ways, and we hoped that by setting up the thing in the beginning, when you hear Mike talking about setting a bear trap and why you'd overbet a pot, all right, and Mike talks about why you'd overbet a pot in the first hand, to have Teddy overbet the pot at the end. So we were trying from a narrative standpoint to allow you to have something to grab onto if you were paying attention.
You did a very good job at it. That's why the movie's a success, as opposed to some of the other poker movies. It's like, they played some cards there, and that was all that they did with it. Excellent. So, well, everyone wants to know, will there be a Rounders 2 ever? It's always speculation.
It's people ask about it all the time. There are, I would say, Matt, Edward, John Dahl, the director, Malkovich, Dave, and I all would do it, and have had many versions of it in our heads to do. There have been issues with the rights to the original movie. There have been issues with getting everybody paid. Who knows? Look, the fact that the movie has such a life now, Jonathan, that people care about it so much, that they quote it so frequently, that they reach out to me to talk about it. It's everything that David and I, you're talking about Dave and I, two lifelong best friends who wanted to write a first movie that other guys like us would be quoting to each other and to the world for 20 years. And that's happened, So whether there's another one or not, I'm pretty sanguine either way.
Well, I guess the fear with making another one is that you might screw it up.
Yeah,
right?
What matters to me more, I'm not going to play scared either, like we would do it if we could do it, but what matters to me more is I wish there were a way that I could really play online poker during this time without having to get an agent to get money on, and then I'm dealing in sort of gray areas of the law and with sketchy people and all that stuff.
You could make a modern day version of Rounders where you have to deal with the guy down the block going, give him a Western Union.
How does the agent, I'm sure you don't do it, but
no.
The agent, what?
I would tell you to actively avoid the games where you need to have an agent, because you don't know who the agent is working for or with. And
what does that mean? You don't know who the agent's working for?
The agent could be working with someone illegal. Who knows who owns these sites, right? Like say hypothetically, say some mob owns a poker site. You don't even know which one it is, or it could be like a random guy. But say it is the mob, and they somehow get taken down, and now they're trying to talk to people, right? They talk to people who are collecting the money. Then they want to talk to the people who they were collecting money from. And next thing you know, maybe you're going to court.
I agree with you about this all completely. That's why I find it like I'm happy to play in a poker game with my friends now. We can go on one of the apps, play on the app, be on Zoom, Venmo each other the money. It's simple. We trust each other. We all know each other. It's perfect.
I actually did an interview with my lawyer, Mac Verstandig, just the other day. He is very well known in the gambling law arena. And he basically said that the only site that's kind of playing by the rules is a site called Global Poker, that somehow they're going through sweepstakes laws within America. But that's like the only one that is actually trying to play by the rules. The other ones are just like, yeah, we know the laws and we don't care.
Yeah,
And
but that means how do you know you can get your money out of them? So do you play on the Bitcoin ones?
I don't play on any poker site from America because at this point I'm busy enough with my work. And when I travel out of the country, I'll play on the like Poker Stars and Party Poker a ton. Like, I mean, that I want to play on sites where I don't have to worry about the money. And I like to play for high stakes. Like, I'm not necessarily playing to pass the time, which I realize now everybody has a ton of time to pass now that we're all locked inside. But what
are you going to do to play poker in this situation though, Jonathan?
So I had already had sort of like 2 months until the World Series of Poker blocked off to just work on things. I was finishing up a book, which I basically got finished, and I was making a big new training course, and I'm in the middle of that. And I knew it would take me like 2 or 3 months to get it all done. So I already had this time blocked off because there really were not a ton of tournament series I wanted to play anyway. And so it's not really affecting me and my work, my poker schedule so far, because my work was already going to be at home. So what am I going to do come May or June or July? I don't know. We're going to figure it out.
You think the World Series will somehow be online?
It's tough because if it is going to be online, it's going to be New Jersey and Nevada only, which is not, it's just not going to be very many people on there, right? I mean, I know they're having World Series of Poker circuit events happening right now.
Right.
Sorry if my kids are screaming out there. I don't know what's happening.
I understand.
No, everyone's at home now. You used to have a nice quiet home.
Situation. It's a challenging situation.
Yeah. So anyway, they'll do something online because they always had online bracelet events for the last few years. They were never like gigantic. And I don't think anyone's going to get up and travel to exactly New Jersey or Nevada to play online poker. Because you can still get on the airplane.
I've never done it, but you can sit in your car just on the other side of the bridge. Is that true?
Not exactly sure about that. You may have to be on an internet connection that is actually physically based in those places.
Right.
Like I know you can go to a coffee shop and play from their Wi-Fi. I know you can do that.
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure about just using your phone or something.
No one's going to coffee shops though, man. This is a difficult spot.
It is. Well, you have to basically rent an apartment is what you'd have to do. You'd have to rent an apartment over there and do that. Where are you based? Are you in New York right now as well?
I'm out of the city. I'm out of the city. Yeah.
You're gone.
I'm about 100 miles out of the city. I left about 10 days ago.
It's probably wise. The city's actually crazy. Some people, I mean, like some stores are just done. Like they're clearly shut down, but everyone else is just out in the streets.
I told this on Tim's pod, so I don't feel bad saying it. Tim Ferriss called me and he said, you should get out of New York City now. And so I did.
Probably wise. I mean, if things are going to go poorly.
And I was able to, we got Showtime. We shut down the show on Thursday night was the end. Not yesterday, a week ago. And so I knew I could get out of here. Well,
good. I'm glad you're in that situation. You don't have to worry about stuff I may have to deal with in the very near future.
No, I mean, I got to figure out how I'm getting food. I have food, but just being aware of this stuff is probably easier to get supplies in New York, though it's nice that places are delivering.
For sure. So how is it writing with a writing partner? Because everything I've done has been very solo for the most part. But, you've been writing with David for a long time.
Yeah, it's over like 23 years. He's my brother, but with none of the baggage of someone who's actually your brother. So we have been, since we're 14 and 15, best friends. So it's it's a very clear and easy thing. We don't write sitting at the keyboard together. We split up the scenes. We outline together. We split up the scenes. We write everything separately. Then one of us will go first rewriting. The other guy will rewrite. It's a very seamless process where each of us has a really good mindset about it. We're just always looking to celebrate what the other person does. And I wouldn't advise it for most people in most situations. We have a unique partnership. And like the Coen brothers, there have been people throughout time, but if you don't think you understand how to put the work in front of your own personal gratification, you shouldn't do it.
So do you both write for all of the characters at the same time, or how does that work?
Yeah. We will outline the whole, this with our writer's room, like the season, and then an individual episode will outline it. But when we split up the scenes, one of us will just go through and write BKDL at the top of it, kind of randomly. Or sometimes you might go, hey, I'll take those 3 scenes in a row because I have an idea for them. And it's like, okay, great. You take those. I'll take the next 3 scenes. Every character. There's no special affinity for one. Both of us, Chuck and Axe and Taylor and Wendy, and those characters are all completely both of us.
Very nice. So you've written for many of the biggest names in Hollywood, right? And I mean,
Yes.
just off the top of my head, Matt Damon and Edward Norton, Brad Pitt, George Clooney, Michael Douglas,
absolutely.
Al Pacino. I mean,
the whole thing. Yeah, of
all
course.
of them. So is there anyone you particularly resonate with, or anyone you particularly like writing for, or seeing them bring your work
it is
to life?
well, listen, these people we get to write billions for. Damien and Paul and Maggie Siff and Asia Kate Dillon. I mean, it's an incredible thing. Dave Costabile. I mean, every one of these people, Condola Rashad. No, look, obviously, we will always have a special feeling for the people who were in Rounders because it was our first movie. And the connection we have with them. John Malkovich, we've written for over this whole period of time. He was in our first 2 movies, and then he had an amazing arc on Billions. And it's an incredible thrill to write for John and to be connected with him for so long. It was an amazing thing to get to write for Matt again on Ocean's 13, 10 years after Rounders. And we're still very close to Matt, very close to Edward, and Malkovich, obviously. So all that stuff is great. Look, getting to collaborate with people at the top of your field is an unbelievable privilege and pleasure. So there's no way I could be like, oh, well, writing for this person's like that. It's all truly like the odds of anyone getting to do it are so small. And I'm fully aware at every minute how privileged and lucky I am to do it. And all the work I've put in, I'm not falsely humble. It's not like, oh, how did this happen? I know exactly how it happened, but it's still an incredibly fortunate set of circumstances.
Excellent. Can you briefly describe Billions to those who do not know it? Because it's on Showtime and you have to pay money to get Showtime. So have you found that show perhaps has less viewership than you would like because it's like a premium service?
No, here's the great thing about Billions fans. Like I said, about Billions fans watch Billions over and over and over again. So no, you want to make a show for a premium cable network if you do what I do, because you can make exactly the show you want. They know they once their audience likes it, they let you make the show. There are very few notes, very little interference, only support from the network. And it's, millions and millions and millions of people watching every week. So I don't really have any ambition beyond that, and the way that people interact with the material, the way they're obsessive about it, I really relate to, because that's how I am about the stuff that I care about.
Awesome. So back when Vine existed, you had 6-second screenwriting lessons. They actually inspired me to make a show called Little Poker Advice, where I make a 1-minute clip using my kids sometimes, the Poker Pros. And can you share some tips that you had to help people be productive and generally enjoy life during
the main thing I tried to talk about was many of us feel like, especially if we want to choose to do something that's outside of the norm, we feel like we need to be chosen, anointed, or given permission. And the truth is, you only need to give yourself permission. That you can, to do any of this kind of work. And if you think about the themes Dave and I have always written about him, you think about Rounders, Matt's caught in this question, Mike McDermott, of which path he wants to follow, right? The one that's tried and true, or this one that he just believes he has in him. And what I want is I have a strong belief that tapping into that secret voice telling you what it is that you hope you can be, what you think you are, is a real key to living a fulfilled life. A real key to being kinder to the people around you in your life is finding a way to not be bitter and to not shut down your wild, crazy, notions about what's possible for you. So I have an expansive worldview in that way for the individual. And so the point of the Vines was to help people understand that they could do that stuff without upsetting their whole life, without quitting their job, without telling the people around them to go screw themselves. But in fact, all you need to do is, for a little bit of time every day, do some work that makes you feel fulfilled. Half hour a day. I like half hour a day. You can write a page. You write a page 6 days a week for a year. You've written 310 pages or something like that. 312 pages.
There you go. It's a book.
There's 52 Sundays. What's 365 minus 52? Math genius.
I'm not good at math. I'm not very good at that. One of the things I cannot do is math on the fly. For real. Like, everybody always laughs at me because I always get it wrong. So I'm not even going to try today. I've learned at some point to not even go for that. I mean, like you said here, I get emails every day from people saying, should I quit my job and be a poker player? And I've gotten a bunch over the last week of, I'm stuck at home. Should I be a poker player? And the answer is like, have you played a lot? Are you a consistent winner? And my fear for a lot of people out there who don't send me an email and just try to do this is that they don't know all the information when they approach something, right? But like you say, you have to kind of get in there and try it, right? Experiment.
Well, right. I love that. Everyone always thinks, because they want to make this big psychological change, and they feel if they change their circumstance, they'll make a big psychological change. I'm now a poker player. I always think about this. I was really nervous to talk to my dad when I wanted to become a writer, and I was like, what's he going to think of this? And telling your father when you have a career, I'm going to. And he just looked at me and said, if you want to write, write. And the truth is, if you want to play poker, play poker. Find the time, figure it out, take a 2-week leave. How about this? First, just start tracking your wins and losses. Just start tracking how you feel at the poker table when you sit there for 2 weeks. And right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff to figure out before you decide if you should. Look, that is a fantasy of mine, right? After Billions, the idea that I would go play in 8 tournaments over the course of a year or something like that. I'll do that someday. But I'll know that I'm doing that as a lark. When I was younger, it was something I considered, but I knew that I wasn't world-class at it. And that the kind of work required to become truly world-class now at poker isn't a kind of work that I want to put in. And so that's probably not a life for me. That doesn't mean I can't. I've won poker tournaments. It doesn't mean that I couldn't go play poker and have a good result or two, but it means it's probably not my life's calling.
I think that's another thing that a lot of people they think they must do exactly this one thing. Like you said, they have to be a poker player now. And, to be fair, if you want to be the best poker player in the world, you must devote your life to it. But you also have to realize there are a lot of other people probably in slightly more ideal situations than yours to devote their whole life to it. And it's not necessarily for you. Like, my goal today is not to be the best poker player in the world because I have a wife and 2 kids and I have stuff to do, right?
You gotta live like Andrew Brokos if you want to be the best poker player in the world. Like, you have to be solving these puzzles all day long and focusing on these puzzles all day long and managing your emotional state all day long and living in a secluded way. There's all these things you have to do, I think.
Yeah, a lot of people are going nuts about the seclusion right now, but when I was 18 to 21, I sat in my office and played online poker like all day, every day. So this is just like normal. Right. My wife will be talking to me. So did you go outside today? I'm like, no, I don't go outside. I go outside once every 3 days.
That's funny.
So you mentioned a hectic work schedule with Billions. What does that entail? Because I think your life and how you create things like great shows and great movies is a mystery to some people.
Well, when we're shooting Billions, Dave and I are, as showrunners, we're responsible for every aspect of it. So we're responsible for writing the show or getting it written. We're responsible for getting it shot right, for editing it, for doing all the post-production, meaning overseeing the sound mix and the final picture parts of making sure the picture is right. So we're just working pretty long hours and with a lot of rigor and focus and discipline. When we're not shooting, my day's pretty, I can be flexible structurally when we're not shooting. If I'm just writing, which I'll write, I can only really, really concentrate and really write pages for a few hours a day. then I can ideate. I can think about stuff. I can take notes. Like there's lots to do. I can make all the producerial phone calls, but the hardest part, the real focused writing, it's just 3 to 4 hours where you're really doing that work.
I think a lot of people even have a problem putting in the 3 to 4 hours though, which, you're very good at, you've been doing it for a while, but how do you sit down and focus? Because you see a lot of people, they're always on social media or always.
Well, I'm on social media a lot. if I write a scene, I'll give myself the reward of then going on Twitter for 10 minutes. Then I'll go right back to writing the scene. It's the way I blow steam. Like people take walks. I could take a walk. I love to exercise, but what I like to do is I'll write a scene. I'll feel good about it. I'll go on Twitter, see what's going on, and I'll go back and do more work.
I mean, it sounds like overly simplistic, but you have to be that way with yourself to some extent. Otherwise, you'll just goof off all day, right?
Well, again, dude, like you, I chose to do a thing that I really love. So it's not that it doesn't feel like work. It is work, but I'd rather kind of be doing it than almost anything, like pretty much than anything else, right? I love it. I love to play poker. Like if I could, no, really, because I think poker's so creative and requires so much focus. As I said, the world disappears from just the table. But I'm also, on this thing that I do, because of all the work I've put in and probably because of just however I was set up, I can be world class at this thing that I do. And so being able to touch that and know that it's worth putting in the time, right? If you have the ability, also, I know I have the ability, Dave and I together, to create, when our actors, to create something that tangibly makes people happy for a period of time. That's like a fucking incredible thing to get to do. So I'm aware of that too. You know what I mean? And that gets you to sit down and do the work.
It definitely does. I mean, that's the same thing with me. I mean, I'll have days where I roll out of bed, I'm tired, I'm like, doing it for the fans, right? I mean, they love the work I put in and people love the work you put in. So congrats on that. Good job, good work.
Thanks, man.
We're basically out of time. So
yeah, I think we've done it.
Great. Where do you want people to go to check out you and your work?
They find me on Twitter at Brian Koppelman. They should listen to my podcast, The Moment, with Brian Koppelman, and watch Billions. I'm very responsive. If you hit me up on Twitter, I'll respond to you.
I think a lot of people really appreciate responsiveness from people who they respect, right? And I don't think enough people do that, but you do an A+ job at it. Like with the Royale in the morning, right? You have to have your Royale and
let's
start the day off right and make sure we get through all this together.
That's right, Jonathan. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Take care. I'll see you.
Bye-bye.